Well, hello, and thank you for having invited me back to present at the State Sheriff's Association Winter Conference. Uh, Today's presentation is going to be on ethics, focus on the standards and recurring issues for criminal justice managers. My name is Michael John Cortez. I am a graduate student at National American University. This presentation was made for this conference and in regard to Professor Straight's CJ 6200 assignment 5.2 for the Learning Plan 5 block. So a little bit about myself for those of you who have not sat in on one of my presentations, or for those of you who are new to um, law enforcement in this area. My name is Michael John Cortez. I have 12 years of combined law enforcement experience in the state of Texas. I'm a certified Master Peace Officer through the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement. I'm also a certified and advanced SWAT tactical operator in the state. I have 5 years approximately of supervisory management experience of subordinate police officers, both in the patrol and on the detective side of law enforcement. I have obtained an Associates of Applied Science degree in law enforcement from South Texas College. I'm also the graduate of South Texas College with a bachelor's degree of organizational leadership and management studies. And I am currently a graduate student with National American University. I have earned 9 hours towards my master's of management and criminal justice degree. So let's get started with the presentation on ethics, and specifically ethics in the criminal justice world. Ethics are defined, or can be commonly defined as, or are the moral principles that govern or influence the way an individual or a group behaves. Ethics are encompassed in what you feel is right and wrong. It's what society feels is right or wrong, and how the law pertains to what is right or what may be wrong. Now, a person's individual take on ethics may be different. There's many influences on an individual which would make them feel like if what they're doing is correct or incorrect. Those can be, socioeconomic factors, geographical factors where they grew up, cultural influences, as well as religious influences. And so, of course, all of us here have an interest in the criminal justice or law enforcement world. So we're going to speak about ethics in criminal justice and law enforcement. Integrity and ethics are part of the main ingredients in which police organizations build trusting relationships with the communities they serve. Ethical conduct by police organizations enhances communication and promotes shared responsibility for addressing crime and disorder. Ethical conduct, both good or bad, can both create a trusted department and crumble one if not present. So when speaking about ethics in the criminal justice world, I want to touch on the 7 recurring ethical issues in today's criminal justice world. First one would be wrongful pursuit of personal gain, favoritism and bias for number 2. Number 3 is abuses of power. The 4th is flawed personal life. 5, deceitfulness. 6, denial of due process. And 7, neglect of duties. So now let's first touch on the wrongful pursuit of personal gain. And this applies to law enforcement officers and or criminal justice managers who have hidden agendas in their attainment of power or positioning within the organization. For example, a chief of a police department who gains personal benefit from his position as chief. This is aside from his duties as the chief of police of that organization. This conduct is considered unethical and can lead to punishment, dismissal, and possible future criminal proceedings. Next thing let's talk about is favoritism and bias. Favoring certain individuals or groups of personnel within the workplace. Research has shown that favoritism in the workplace, even slight favoritism, can build dramatic discrepancies in employees of the organization, leaving managers with a greater issue of how to deal with the discrepancies that they have created. Oftentimes, you have that favored employee that stands out from the other employees. Um, and if you're looking at it from the outside in, you're monitoring that employee closely. You you have an understanding that that person is probably seems a little bit lazier than the other employees, and this is because they've been given that sort of power by their supervisors. So employees those employees may feel that a certain sense of entitlement is given to them in their position because of previous favoritism, and they become very unproductive. Well, let's touch on abuses of power, and in my opinion, I regard this as the most important ethical issue that we deal with today, and probably the most prevalent that you see on mainstream media, and reasons why people or law enforcement officials lose their jobs or get arrested. And it's from these abuses of power. They can include bribery, theft, public corruption, performing favors for others outside of the organization, and it occurs when officers or criminal justice managers begin to believe that their misconduct is acceptable. So they do it over and over and over, whether it's um, just a half-off meal at the local restaurant or a free cup of coffee at the local convenience store. The officer begins to believe that um, conduct is acceptable, opening the door to other type corruption, bribery, or theft uh, by the officer in later on in their careers. And so as it happens and continues to occur, and the officer begins to believe that that conduct is acceptable, um, you start to fall down or into what we call the slippery slope to corruption. Many scholars and practitioners claim that accepting gratuities is a precursor to corruption. Officers who accept gratuities, even the slightest, lose trust and respect from the communities they serve. Agencies should introduce policies that reject gratuities for their officers because it is the most ethical thing to do. How many times do you go to the store and I've been a victim of it myself, or guilty of it myself. A clerk at the store wants to, give you half off of your coffee, or provide you with a free drink that morning. Um, you kind of stop them from doing so and tell them, hey, you know what? I'm not really in the right to accept that. I'm going to pay for my coffee. And then the people behind you start to gather because it creates a line and they're trying to get in and out of the store, but now they're waiting on you. And you kind of seem like the bad guy when you begin to get into this sort of argument with the clerk over what's right and what's wrong. Even though they're doing it, just out of courtesy, they may uh, have a policy on providing this type of service to police officers, but nonetheless, it is wrong to accept these type of things. Now, this is a big one too because these underlying sort of factors can have a big influence in what a law enforcement professional or criminal justice manager does while they're on duty, and that's a flawed personal life. Officers, criminal justice managers must conduct themselves properly in all environments, not just while on duty, but off duty as well. A flawed personal life can consist of officers or criminal justice managers who abuse drugs or alcohol, individuals who personally interact or have relationships with known criminals or felons that they've dealt with while working, officers or criminal justice managers who engage in criminal activity outside of their profession. So you definitely want to steer clear of this. Let's move along to deceitfulness. A deceitful officer or criminal justice manager is one who may lie in certain situations to favor themselves or others in certain positions. Dishonesty while carrying out your duties also constitutes deceitfulness, as well as the covering up of or deliberately reporting certain non-facts or untruthful information in favor of bad judgment or policing from the organization. So basically, when you try to cover up any type of situation that may portray your department or organization in a negative light, it is seen as you being deceitful, and that is ethically wrong. Denial of due process. When an officer or criminal justice manager fails to recognize certain processes or procedures afforded to individuals by the law, they are denying their due process. Also jumping to conclusions while performing investigations, or unlawfully arresting and violating certain freedoms and rights of a person. We cannot jump to conclusions as law enforcement officers or criminal justice managers. We have to review the totality of the circumstances at hand and then make ethically sound and correct decisions on the processes that we are going to place those persons through. So denial of due process is also a large ethical factor when it comes to misconduct or ethical misconduct. And last but not least, let's touch on neglect of duties. Now, when you neglect your duties, it can have some serious ramifications on your position or with your status or ranking at the department or organization you work with. Every employee within the criminal justice system has duties assigned to them that need to be fulfilled, and that pretty much goes for every employee of any organization. Not just law enforcement or criminal justice oriented. The gross neglect to fulfill these duties may constitute violation of laws against disobedience of lawful orders, abuse of discretion, and malfeasance, which is the intentional performance of an official act or use of one's official powers to achieve an unlawful, harmful, or unjustified end. Let's touch on some of your management responsibility when it comes to ethics in the workplace or ethics in the criminal justice organization. The manager's responsibilities are to ensure that subordinates uphold and respect the values of the organization, to train and subject subordinate employees to make sound decisions in their field of work, to regulate employee misconduct by setting in place policies regarding ethical expectations, and of course, when there is any type of violation of these policies or regulations, you need to police your employees who have performed such unethical conduct. And going forward, we need to briefly touch on vicarious liability. Now, if you are a criminal justice manager, or have had any type of supervisory experience in the criminal justice world, you should have an understanding of what vicarious liability is. It's the criminal justice managers, to include officers in supervisory positions, may be held liable for officer misconduct under vicarious liability. Vicarious liability may hold you responsible for a subordinate's unlawful or wrongful acts committed if the supervisor was in a position to stop or in a position to have influenced a subordinate from performing the acts otherwise. So basically, you can be held responsible for your subordinate's actions if you didn't intervene, or if you didn't train correctly, if you ignored any type of misconduct that was going on, at any time when that individual is working, pretty much under your colors or under your supervision. Criminal responsibility and ramifications of having been convicted of, or even sometimes just accused of, being involved in any type of ethical violations. This is something you guys you definitely need to read up on these sections of the penal code. You do not want to be on the wrong end of any of these type of investigations. You can talk about bribery, which is Penal Code Section 36.02. Of course, this is Texas law. That is a second-degree felony. It carries a maximum of 20 years in a state prison facility. Texas Penal Code Section 39.02, abuse of official capacity, carries misdemeanor to felony range of punishment. It depends on what it is that you're obtaining or what you actually did to constitute that offense. And also Texas Penal Code Section 39.03, official oppression, is a Class A misdemeanor. And all these pretty much encompass, when you use your powers or your duties as a police officer, or misuse of your duties and the misuse of your powers as an officer of the law to obtain some type of benefit. You do not want to be associated with any of these things. So there are criminal ramifications for unethical conduct, and these are just some of them. There are more. You can research into them a little bit more if you'd like, and those are the certain sections there where you can find these violations. So in our previous spring conference, if you weren't able to review or sit in on my presentation, it was about trending issues in the criminal justice world, and currently, we're dealing with, or what I identified in that presentation, are use of force incidents, vehicle pursuits and when to pursue violators, biased type policing, and relations with the media or media relations, really transparency with the media and reporting truthfulness with the media. And so we'll kind of relate them to how they coincide with ethics in the next couple of visual slides here. So use of force incidents in today's criminal justice world are considered to be the most trending topic of debate in the country regarding law enforcement. Can fall under the abuse of power, denial of due process, bias, as well as the neglect of duty categories of ethical misconduct, and that pretty much depends on the situation that's being investigated or handled by your organization. In a shooting, there could have been a car chase that led up to a use of force incident involving, a weapon that a subject brandished upon you, sort of like how we see in the picture there, and that turned into possible, bias issues if it was due to, or what the media may claim, race as a reason why you're pursuing the individual. Denial of due process if it escalates to a shooting in which the subject loses his life. People are going to scrutinize why, the individual was shot, why that use of force was used in that certain situation, and that subject was no longer able to stand trial. And also neglect of duties if it is investigated and seen that your department failed to carry out certain duties or failed to follow certain policies that you have in place to prevent these things from happening. So it pretty much depends on the situation. You can have all areas of ethical misconduct in one certain incident. So when it comes down to vehicle pursuits and when to pursue a certain individual or individuals, these are some factors to consider, of course. I'm going to reiterate these from my previous presentation. Safety of the general public is always number one. Safety of the officers involved or the officer involved, and also safety of the violator. Vehicle pursuits fall under the neglect of duties, recurring ethical issues category, or can fall under that category if something may go wrong and you find yourself in an investigation, questioning why you actually pursued an individual. So when we talk about bias policing, we're talking about an individual's personal beliefs, no matter if they're factually supported or opinionated views. They should not have an influence on an officer's decision-making process in the field. That's being biased. You certainly cannot be biased towards anybody in this type of environment. They can lead to violations of an individual's civil rights, and also bias policing falls under the bias, abuse of power, and denial of due process and neglect of duties ethical issues categories. And the last thing I want to touch on in today's presentation is media relations. When dealing with the media, it's essentially important for officers and criminal justice managers to be transparent, truthful, and factual so that the public's trust in the department is ensured. Deliberate variations of what is originally reported to the media would be at their fault rather than the department's. Any violations of these relations falls under the deceitfulness category of ethical issues in criminal justice. You do not want to be known as that individual or manager who is always dodging the media, is always jumping the gun and reporting non-factual things just to maybe make your department look good in a media sense. You just want to kind of take a step back, wait for factual information to come in, and just report that, and no variations of those facts, or else you might find yourself in some type of trouble for ethical misconduct if you're reporting false information, and or if you're reporting information that should not be reported, and that may be protected by law. So in conclusion of the facts and information that we've presented to you today, we as officers of the law and managers of police organizations must ensure that ethical conduct is adhered to for the public and the communities we serve. Ethical standards and policies must be reinforced to our officers and employees to ensure this. And remember, any deviation from these standards will have negative consequences for your organization and up to criminal ramifications if performed. So if you're ever in my area or you need clarification on anything presented today, or just want to chat, you can contact me at the listed phone number, as well as at the listed email address presented here. Feel free to also search and look up my references for this presentation. It was very beneficial and very helpful to me in putting together this information to disseminate to you guys. Thank you, and stay safe.